In the stillness of night, the Lord is there. It all started at the age of 19 when author, speaker, singer, life coach, educator, and model Jill Chambers married her husband, Danny, and traveled the world with their music ministry, Carry the Call. A founding pastor for 22 years, she invested in the lives of thousands of people globally, training them in leadership skills. Today, God is leading her down a new path. After being married for 30 years to her husband, Danny, the Lord called him home, and now she is called to carry the call without her love. This is her story. This is today's Nashville. This is faith. Sweet Jill, my husband and I, Ted, have been praying for you for almost a year and a half. And I am so blessed and honored that you would invite me into your home to share your faith and what God has brought you through. But before we get there, I want to know about your life with Danny, where it started, and just your love story and your faith. It's an amazing story and journey that he has brought you through and where he's taking you.
Well, 32 years ago, I married my happily ever after. I was 19, I was very young, and he had 2 children from a previous marriage, so it was a blended family.
How did you meet him?
So we met at church. He was leading worship and teaching and preaching, and we started courting and dating, and our situation was unique. And so how we dated was he would come to my parents' house where I was living, and we would date together and he would bring his kids with him. And my mom was she was very adamant about, this will be your life. Mm-hmm. So we're not going to let you drop the kids off and go out to eat. We're going to all date together. This family is going to be one unit. It's going to be, it's one thing. So we want you to be very aware of the decisions that you're making and be very aware.
Did it scare you that you were going to be an instant mom at age 19?
Absolutely. It was very scary. I sorted laundry. Right after we got married, I sorted laundry and I cried because it was like, I'm never getting out of the laundry room. There was so many clothes.
How old were the kids?
They were 8 and 11 when we got married. And so, and he had full custody of the kids. So I always told everyone I was adopted because, they were together before we were together. But we fell in love, and God allowed us to travel the world and do ministry and worship. We were able to bring worship into churches. There was a season where Danny was a youth pastor, and there was no music for the students. He had done this backward masking thing where you burn your rock and roll, right? And but then the man that hosted the backward masking thing, he actually gave Danny Integrity Hosanna number 7, which was Don Moen. And he listened to the cassette tape, that's how old it was, in the car, and he felt something that was really different in the music. And he just put his hands up in the car and said, Lord, I don't know what this is, but I want it. And within the next few weeks, he started leading worship in the youth group, and it grew from like 50 students to over 700.
Where were you? Were you
we
here
were in Oklahoma
Nashville?
City.
Oklahoma City.
And so he had the largest youth group in the Midwest, and it was based on the worship. It was a very, very, that was a very divine intersection in our lives. And that then opened doors for us to go into churches and bring that sound, because it was a very different sound. It was very contemporary. It was something that young people, students, wanted to be a part of. And if you think back in the 80s, 90s, the worship music was older. It wasn't anything that felt relevant to students. And so he brought that into churches, which then allowed us to travel and do recordings. And then eventually God began to speak to us about moving out of Oklahoma City to here to Nashville. And in 1997, we moved to Nashville. We started a church. And it was a great blessing in our life. We attracted a lot of the musicians because Nashville has musicians at every corner. But we were able to also speak into their lives as traveling, units, because my husband traveled so much, and throughout our lives he was on the road. Sometimes I was with him, sometimes I wasn't. So it gave us a unique voice to those traveling musicians, those in, if they were AV, all the people that had to tour. We were able to speak to them a little differently about how they can maintain their life. Were you singing also? I was singing with him. I was singing background with him. He had me on the stage all the time. He had me speaking at the church.
How was that?
It was really different.
Yeah, you mentioned briefly that he's a one-take.
Oh, he's one-take Jake. So Danny would get up, sing a song. He would be in a studio, laying down a vocal track. We'd do a video segment, one-take Jake. And then there's me, like do over, wait, do over. But he taught me how to be confident, and he really gave me a place. And there were several times, Terry, where I would get up to speak at our church, and men would get up and leave. And I thought they were just like going to the restroom together like we chicks do. But no, they were taught that women were not allowed to speak in church. And so here, being in Nashville, Danny didn't realize it, but I was a catalyst for women speakers in this city, and I didn't even know it. He just kind of put me on the platform. So it kind of paved the way for some.
Did you know about that when you?
I didn't understand it at first until I actually got a letter from someone who said, women are not allowed to speak in the church. And
how did you react to that?
I just kind of looked at Danny like, am I not supposed to do this? He goes, no, you're doing what I asked you to do. This is how you're completing me. You're my wife. You're my helpmate. And so this is how you're helping me. And so, yeah, I just kept on speaking. And if men would get up and leave, I just kind of look at them and smile and be like, well, bye. Because in my heart, I thought, well, who taught you your ABCs? Who taught you how to add and subtract? Probably a woman. Let's just be real. And so I had to change my paradigm and not see it as rejection, but just really just walk in my shoes and walk through the doors that were open, and I saw it as me helping my husband, not as me competing with him, but completing him.
Tell me about Carry the Call.
Carry the Call was our very first live recording with Integrity Hosanna. And they came to the church. So we had gone to the table several times with Integrity. We wrote several songs. I co-authored some songs for Integrity Hosanna. And they wanted to feature Danny as an artist, but he was too contemporary. And he wasn't a pastor yet. So as soon as we started the church, they were able to say, oh, you're a pastor, let's do a recording. So in 1997, literally weeks after we started our church, we did our first recording, which was Carry the Call.
So pastor, music artist, traveling. How did you handle that? And you were having children too, weren't you?
Yes, we call them our tribe of five. So we had the two, and then we had three together, and it's really a balancing act. It was recognizing each season is different, and preparing for each season. No different than here in Nashville, we get a lot of snow, get a lot of weather, so you just kind of prepare differently for that moment in that season. So in certain seasons of my children's lives, I knew I had to stay home. I had to be there for them. They were priority. They were always a priority, but there would be times when, as they got a little bit older, that I knew that I could travel because they were okay. And then there were times when I knew I had to stay home.
And you also, at that time, were you going to school with getting your degree, and you were like leading people in your church too about leadership skills and.
I didn't actually go to a university, but I went through several training courses, one of which was behavioral science, which introduced me to the personality styles and the DISC, and it taught me how people behave, because our decisions and our actions are based on our, that creates our behavior, but it's how we think and how we're wired. So I never really went to a university, but I did take a lot of training courses on especially the behavioral science, which is how people are wired, and that empowered me to assimilate people, especially in our church. If they were, extroverted, then I would put them as a greeter because they loved people. If they were introverted, I would put them, counting data or entering data because they were pretty much precise on not wanting to make a mistake and misspell something or mistype something. And so it helped me learn where to place people within the organization, because you have a lot of people that want to volunteer, but if you don't put the people in the right place, then they always feel like they're doing it wrong.
And I think it's interesting too, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later, but I want to talk about the day that your life changed. Jill, let's talk about the morning that your life changed.
It was September 23rd, 2020. I had woken up to wake my daughter up for school and didn't realize it, but my husband had passed. And so it was unexpected, completely shocking. We were preparing to move, change locations, staying in the city, but just downsizing. And so all of our conversations had to do with forward, future, next. He wasn't going to be a part of that with me anymore. So I woke up a widow.
I remember reading a post that you sat on his lap the night before and you were talking about the house and Should you? Shouldn't you?
Yeah.
Where are we going?
Well, we had a buyer. The first look had a cash offer, and so then we put an offer down, and they backed out of the offer for no reason. And my realtor, she got the earnest money, and so I just thought, wow, that was kind of a blessing in disguise. And so we showed the house the night before I found him, and we came back from showing the house, and because we had to leave, and the people were very sweet, but I said, do we have to sell the house? And he's like, we really need to downsize. And I said, okay. So then I crawled up in his lap, and I put my arms around him, and I just said, you know what, wherever we go, as long as you're with me, I'll go. And prior to this season, my husband was very, very sick. We had found mold in our house, and it impacted his mental health. So for almost a solid year, my husband was extremely mentally sick.
You were telling me about that earlier. You didn't really know what was going on, did you, initially?
No, he just seemed different, not enough different where it was obvious. His memory, he was manic. He was like a child. I couldn't get him to stop talking and stop interrupting and calm down. And so we saw a functional medicine doctor who informed us that he had mold psychosis. And for some people, 20% of people have sensitivity to black. It's bad anyways, but some people actually, it is deadly. It actually puts holes in your brain like carbon monoxide. So that put us on a journey. We went and did treatments. So he did these neurofeedback treatments to his brain. But the night I sat on his lap and wrapped my arms around him and told him just happy to have him back, he was back. About 89% of his brain had regenerated and healed itself. So God did a real miracle in healing his brain and healing his body. And so that day changed my life. I had no idea. It was coming. And it's opened me to a completely different world now. Widows, things that, you thought that, when I say the word widow, most people imagine someone in their 70s, 80s who've lived a full life with their happily ever after. But the truth is, Terry, most widows are under the age of 59. So 2,900 women a day become a widow. This is before the COVID statistics, which we don't have back yet. And so there's a real need out there for, awareness and just really helping. The Bible talks about taking care of the widows and orphans. And part of my passion is to hopefully not only reach out to widows and tell them there's hope, because I found hope through this journey. I found great hope. My journey has included grief, which I had never really lost anyone close to me. My grandparents were elderly, and so for them it was more of a graduation. It was a celebration, and this was more tragic. And so this kind of grief was very painful. I'm a silver lining Sally, so I like to find the happy in life and focus on it. And I remember a story when I was really grieving one day, and I just wanted to avoid it, like press fast forward. If you've ever been in a season in your life where you just want to press fast forward and get through it quick, and I felt like the Lord just said, you need to stop. You need to grieve through this. You have to go through this. There's a story I share where Danny and I were in Hawaii on our 27th anniversary, and he wanted me to film him surfing. Now, mind you, he was like in his late 50s, so this isn't like, he was 30 or 40. So he was, he had rented me a GoPro, and he went out on his surfboard, and he's like, are you coming? And I'm just kind of walking out in the ocean in the waves, fighting the waves like crazy. We had rented the GoPro, and I didn't want it to fall off my arms. And so I'm been fighting the waves, trying to get behind him. And he keeps turning around saying, are you coming? Are you coming? And I'm like, I actually wanted to say, cuss, but I didn't do that. And so I follow him out. I'm almost to him, and I just give up. I'm so exhausted from fighting these waves. And then I realized what happened was when I gave up, the wave would come and pick me up, take me closer to shore. So I got further away from him, but then it would draw me back closer to him. So that pattern of picking me up, taking me further away, and then drawing me closer. And it was interesting because in about 10 minutes, I was exactly where I needed to be. But it was after I gave up and gave in. And the Lord said to me, stop fighting the waves of grief, Jill. He said, I'm taking you to a place you've never been before. But if you don't trust me, you're not going to get there. And he said, the very vehicle I'm trying to get you there is through grief. And it's been interesting because grief has done that. There's been moments where I feel farther away from God, but then he picks me up, and I feel a little farther away in my emotions, but then it pushes me closer into him. And it's been a very interesting season and a very interesting journey. I've never experienced grief before.
Yesterday, you posted something on Facebook, and it was your anniversary.
Yes.
How do you handle some of those times?
I wish I could tell you awesomely, but not awesomely. I cry a lot.
Do you dread it? Do you dread those dates?
This was my second anniversary of my vow fulfilled, which I had to change my paradigm of that I'm a vow fulfiller till death do us part. Nobody wants to be the vow fulfiller because you don't want to part through death. But I had to change my paradigm and realize, wow, I'm a promise keeper. I did it. And so my 32nd anniversary is now my second anniversary of being a vow fulfiller. I have to see beyond the pain into the purpose, or it really does leave me paralyzed. And I did dread my anniversaries after he passed. Valentine's Day was really hard. You know, we have this wonderful social media thing called Facebook that brings all your memories up. So looking back at all the times we taught together and sung together and led together and had all our anniversaries together and dates together and trips together, you know, I had to stop focusing on what I no longer have and start appreciating what I did have. And that is a great full life with an amazing man who I still call my happily ever after. He was a great man, and he took me a lot of places, and he showed me a lot of things, and he believed in me, and I wouldn't be who I am without him. And so that is the perception that keeps me going. Instead of looking at what I don't have and what I no longer have, I have to see what he invested in me and deposited in me. And there will be a great reunion. You know, one of the pastors at my church said that heaven is our home and earth is our opportunity. And so we know that heaven is our home and earth is just full of opportunities for us, opportunities to meet people, opportunities to help people, opportunities to be generous, to shine the light, share our faith. But eventually, we're all going to make it home one day.
When we come back, we're going to talk about that in your journey and where God is leading you to continue to carry the call. Jill, before we talk about your new journey that God has taken you on, can you share one funny moment with you and Danny or the family?
Yes, so we work with John Maxwell's Equip organization, training pastors all across Europe. And one of the assignments that we had was in Switzerland. So we were able to go to the Swiss Alps, and we were able to train pastors in the Swiss Alps of Switzerland. And one of the co-trainers with us was a NASCAR driver named Lane. And so we were on top of the mountain, taking these alpine slides down the mountain. And my husband, being the gentleman that he is, went first. And that's actually what he always did. You know, the scripture that says he will go before me. Danny took that very literal, like he will go before me in case something, you know, would happen to me. So he went first, and then I went second. But I'm the slow, enjoy the mountains, look at the flowers, look at the mountain, you know, look at the trees, see the cows with the cowbells. And I'm sandwiched in between these major, like aggressive, type A, fast, quick. They don't care about the scenery. They want to be the first, you know, to arrive at the base of the mountain. And so my husband goes first, and then I go, and the next thing I know, I have 2 feet planted in my back, and the NASCAR driver, he's a NASCAR driver, actually hit me all the way down the slide. I have him behind me, following down the slide. And so from then on, my husband, you know, it was kind of a joke between him and Lane about, you know, why you chasing my wife down the mountains. And so that's just one. We have so many fun memories. We got to travel the world, you know, and it was really wonderful to be together.
And I read that your youngest daughter was a surprise.
She was a surprise. That was a fun memory, totally shock. And I remember showing him my pregnancy stick, and he just went, "What?" And I was like, "I'm pregnant?" And I had done some TV work, to shot a couple pilots for ESPN, and I was like, "That's over," you know. And but it's interesting how God saw this day, you know, 17 years ago, and he gave me an extra gift so that in this season that I'm in right now, I wouldn't be alone. And so she's with me, she's 17. The other 4 are married. I have 5, we call them our tribe of 5. And all 4 of my 5 kids are married. And it's just me and my last, and her name happens to be Destiny because it was Destiny that she came. So she's a real blessing.
Is she a junior or senior?
She's a junior.
Mm-hmm. So tell me now where God is leading you.
Well, you know, Terry, the thing is, I feel like I have walked in this path of ministry, which has led me into different cultures, church cultures, leadership cultures, behind the scenes. We've done media, you know, we've done radio, we've done, you know, writing songs. My latest is now I'm an author.
Yeah, let's talk about Wired.
I'm very excited about Wired.
It's interesting too, like you said, it's how everything is kind of mingled in together. You know, you've written a book about being wired and different personalities, and now I wondered, as I read this, does your personality come out in this book now?
Yeah, when in 2020, right before we were all quarantined, my husband said, "You need to write that book." I've been studying behavioral science for a long time, and I love it. And I utilized the principles and the tools that I share in my book to help assimilate people, whether it's in a business, whether it's in a church, relationships, marriages, some of these principles of how we're all wired differently. Because what we do is we take our differences and it becomes a liability. And I want us to use our differences as an asset so that we're stronger together. You know, somebody that has critical thinking, that looks and sees the glass half empty, you know, they're typically it's a negative, but it's not a negative if they know how to fill it back up. And so some of us have eyes to see things that need to be fixed, not because we want to complain, but because we want to fix them. So when you understand how you're wired, you understand why you behave the way you do, then my whole mantra is I want you to understand how you behave so that you can control your behavior and not be controlled by your behavior. So for instance, there are people that are extrovert and what we would refer to as an I temperament. They're interrupters. They interrupt all the time. So if I know that I'm wired to be an interrupter, I can choose to be patient and not interrupt everyone. So I'm choosing my behavior rather than being ruled by it and making an excuse for it. So this book I started in 2020 and I finished it after Danny passed. I felt like I needed to finish it just, you know, because he would want me to. But I also realized that even in grief, the different styles of personalities and behavior come through our grief. And so there's a style, the D style is more of the director, kind of the type A. They're really driven. And I've noticed in grief, that style wants to take control of things. And most of the time, it's not theirs to control. The I wants to make it fun. So even as we were preparing to make arrangements for Danny's celebration of life, my sons and I have I in us. And the way that we cope is through humor. And the S's are just looking for peace. They just want peace in the family. They want everyone to get along. And then the C's want to be correct. And so it's interesting that I wrote this book based on life experiences, how I've utilized these resources and these tools in coaching, life coaching, marriage coaching, leadership coaching. But then now I'm actually able to utilize these things in grief coaching.
Did you discover anything about yourself going through this process when you started looking at the book, think, oh, this is something I didn't know, that I am this now?
You know what, I realized that it's okay to it's okay to be who I am and not try to be what other people want me to be or think I should be. Even becoming a widow, even the word widow just sounds so odd for me to say, and for a long time I didn't want to admit that I was one. Being married for 30 years, I never was single. I really didn't have a single life. Now I'm learning that. But what I learned about myself was that I love people. I love all kinds of humans. I love humanity. I love how they're wired. Even if I disagree, I want to know why you think the way you do. Not because I want to convert or change you the way I think, but I really want to understand. I really want to understand people because I believe we are all a form of God. He said we were created in His image. So if you think differently than me, then you are a part of God that I want to know. So what I learned about myself was that it's okay to be different, for myself to be different, and it's okay for others to be different, and to celebrate those differences rather than to try to make everybody the same. You know, one of my mentors always said, if two of you are exactly alike, one of you is unnecessary.
We have about a minute left. What would you say to somebody that is grieving right now?
I would say it will not last forever. I will say that in the midst of grief, there's a facet of God that I never experienced, because you don't experience Him until you're going through this kind of pain. But when you wake up and you realize He's with you, He's never left you, and you can press into Him, you see that He's intentional. And throughout this last 18 months of my life, my eyes have been open to see the intentionality of God, even in the midst of my grief. And what grief does is it tries to get you to close your eyes to God. He's the only source that can get you through the grief. And if you close your eyes to Him, you will miss so many amazing facets of who He is. If you keep your eyes open, you'll see that He really is there for you. Little things that you think about, all of a sudden someone will mention. Things that you remembered, all of a sudden you find them in a drawer. And it's God's way of saying, I'm with you, I'm not going to leave you, and you're going to make it.
Jill, thank you so much. We love you. You're so precious.
you.
My friend, are the waves of grief pulling you in and out? I want you to take the hand of Jesus. He will lift you up. Keep your eyes on Him. This is today's Nashville. This is faith.